Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and thank you so much for joining us today. Today, I'm really excited that we have Jennifer Harper, who is the owner of Bridge Financial Planning in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So XYPN member and avid XYPN Radio listener and previous guest, Scott Frank, told me I just had to have Jennifer on, and I am really glad he did. So I thought, as with many of our guests, we end up talking a lot about the firm, so I thought that was the direction we would end up going, but ultimately we ended up focusing on her financial literacy program called Common Sense Financial Literacy, which she founded to help promote financial education to students age 16 to 22. In this interview, we talked about her career path, which started with her working for a family business in medical device sales, took her through investment banking, and ultimately led her to found the Common Sense Financial Literacy Program and her fee-only financial planning firm, which has taken off in its first year. So as always, you can access the show notes and additional resources at xyplanningnetwork.com/54. And don't forget to sign up for XYPN 16, our national conference, which will be held in San Diego, September 18th through the 21st. And if you join the VIP group at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP, we will be posting some major conference ticket discounts as a thank you for your involvement. All right, here's my interview with Jennifer Harper. Hey, Jennifer, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being on.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So you were nominated, as many of our recent podcast guests have been. You were nominated by another XYPN member, a recent interview with Scott Frank. He emailed me to say, you have to have Jennifer on because she has so much cool stuff going on that you're going to want to hear her story. So I am so thankful that you were able to make the time to be on because we will probably prove Scott right. So,
well, it's an honor. Thank you.
So let's start at the beginning as we usually do with interviewees. So how did you kind of get into financial planning? What was your initial career path into the field?
It was a complete accident.
I love it.
I was working on my MBA program, and I had been working for my family's business. And at the time, they had a medical equipment company. And I kept having the feeling that really to get out and build my own reputation or my own professional world, I really needed to do something different. And if I came back to that, then that was great. But if I didn't, that was okay too. But I felt like I needed a different experience. So while I was working on my MBA, I took a part-time job as basically a file clerk at a trust and investment department of a local bank, and worked there for probably 6 or 9 months part-time while I was working on the MBA program. And their junior portfolio manager and securities trader left. And when they left, the manager of the department came to me and said, hey, you seem to like this work. Is this something you'd want to do? And I said, sure. So I did that for another couple of years and really did enjoy it. And that was in 2000 and stayed there probably till 2002. And after I'd finished my program, I went to the boss and said, I do really like this. What's next in my career here? And he was a really gruff guy, but I really like him and really respect him in a lot of ways. And this is one reason why. He said, well, this is a really, really small department. Until somebody retires or dies, there's nowhere for you to go. And
at least he was honest.
Exactly. And I still respect the heck out of him for that. So, but of course, that's a big red flag for any young person trying to start their career. And so I started looking for another job. One of the trust officers of that bank left and went to a wirehouse firm and said, you ought to come over here. You get licensed, you do all these things. And it was more opportunity than I had to grow than I had where I was currently. So I went and stayed in the brokerage wirehouse side of things for about 6 years. And during that time, earned the CFP designation, but also came to really see the good, the bad, the ugly of the industry. One thing that stands out in my mind, clear as a bell, was going to one of these annuity sales lunches. And I just kept asking a lot of questions about it. I was just like, so let me get this straight. Is this how this works? How does this, and what's the sales commission on that? And I just remember just thinking, I just can't quite get my head around how this is in the best interest of the client. And not that all annuities are always bad, but
sure,
I feel like they're oversold. And the guy sitting beside me said, you keep saying no to annuities and I'll keep buying airplanes. And, it was just something, I just thought there's something wrong with this. This isn't the way the world is supposed to be. And so that was really, a time where I just stood back and I was just like, there has to be a better way. There has to be something out there where you can provide good advice, good service, make a good living, and feel good about it at the end of the day. And wanted to move away from that wirehouse mentality and went back into the trust and investment world from 08 to 13. When I first started there, came in as a VP of private wealth management, loved it. We had a great team, really did a lot of good work, but the industry changed quite a bit after 2008. Banks aren't the same as they were 10 years ago.
Sure.
And so living through that industry change was just something that I kind of had that old feeling again of there's got to be a better way. There's got to be something out there different.
I have to say you went to your first job in 2001, it sounded like, and then 2008. So when you take trading jobs, we can just expect the market to blow up apparently, because you seem to have a knack for getting in at the bottom. So
yeah. Well, I remember sitting in front of a Bloomberg machine for 9/11. And I remember, in 08, just everyone turning green, just panicked. Nobody had seen anything like this. I think a lot of the old guys, and I say old guys, but most of them are in the industry, and they kind of walk around with this, been there, done that, seen it, got the t-shirt. And this was different. Nobody had seen this before.
Funny, that is a different view. I was obviously not in the industry for 2001, and I was actually taking an investment course in my CFP program during 2008. So I was not in the firms watching it. I just kind of saw the after effects. But it seems like everyone, right, wrong, or otherwise, everyone has battle scars from those time periods, just from watching that whole process.
Yeah, I don't think you can go through it and not be affected or not realize those days when the markets were really bad and you question yourself as an advisor and you say, am I really giving good advice? Mm-hmm. Am I helping people? And then, to be able to stick through it and watch a few years later and say, yeah, that was good advice. Sticking with it was good advice. And the principles of financial planning do matter. And, those things start coming back to you if you've been able to ride that storm out a time or two. It gives you more confidence to not second guess yourself when the markets are maybe a little more volatile than you're used to.
Yeah, and recognizing the value of financial planning, right? I think the investment only folks just got crushed because if all you have to stand on is your returns year after year, you failed because the market went down, something you have no control over.
You're going to have a bad year if all you do is investing. If you do planning and you're really holistic about it and you're helping people not just on investments, which, no matter who you are, you can't control the market. So if you're doing something more than that, then you have that relationship, you have that contact with the clients in a way that you can't affect the market, but you can help them through it.
Help them navigate it. Yeah, I remember I was in one of our projects that semester for investments was a investing game where you pick an industry and you pick, 30 stocks or something, and whoever had the highest returns at the end of the year got some, prize. And I remember, I think the winner, and it was spring of 2008 or 2009. I'm sorry, spring of 2009. I think the winner was only down 25%. And then we had a couple of people that went with the financial industry and they were down like 60. But anyway, so at this point you have your CFP, you've been, it sounds like mostly on the investing side, the brokerage world, that sort of thing. So, and you mentioned kind of looking for a better way. So I guess, how did you go about finding the better way? I mean, how did you get introduced to kind of this other world of financial planning?
So I do think that, the experience at the bank was better. It was more holistic. It was less wirehouse. It was more relationship driven. But just the whole industry in that world is continuing to change. And I'll be very honest, I got very jaded. I just thought, what does the next 30 years of my life look like if I stay in this environment? The answer wasn't good. It was feeling like a rat on a wheel. And I just thought, this isn't what I want for my life. And when I left the bank, I left with the full intention of never going back into this industry. I left with the full intention of, hey, I've been taking my own medicine, so to speak, with financial planning. My husband and I are in a position where I can go do something I'm passionate about in the community. I don't have to make a ton of money to be happy. Let me go do something that I care about, that I believe in. And so I left and went to an organization that I'd had ties with for a while back. And that goes into common sense financial literacy, which I guess we can come back to. And I love the work. I love the organization. I admire what they do. But within a year of being out of this industry, I realized this really is my calling. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. I missed the clients. I missed the work. And so I really just did a lot of soul searching and said, well, I don't necessarily want to go back to a wirehouse. I don't necessarily want to go back to a bank. And I went, well, crap, that means I've got to do it myself, doesn't it? So then I actually came across, I was searching for, okay, how do you do this? What are the steps? And I actually came across an article you wrote about technology and how it's changed a lot in the last 10 years. What was not possible 10 years ago is now. And I started looking around and I went on to XY Planning Network site and I was just like, yeah, they get it. This is what I'm looking for.
Oh, funny. I did not know that.
Really? And so January of 15, I think I was member 40 something. January of 15, when y'all opened up, some of the compliance support, I jumped right on board because I was like, this is what I've been looking for. This mentality, this holistic approach, this idea that it doesn't have to be multi-million-dollar clients. It can be. I've got some of those. Those are great to have, but we can serve more than that. We can do more than that. We don't have to play by the old rules to do a good job and provide a good service.
Now that you say that, I think you were actually firm 50 because we were at 49 on 12/31, and we had a little bonus for the team, and the team was Maddie at that time. And so we had a little bonus if we hit 50 members, and we hit 50 members, I think, on January 1st. And I'd have to look back to see if that was you, but I think it was. So we'll say firm number 50.
Awesome. I know y'all had several people join January 1st that year.
So somewhere in that little batch. So it's so cool to see, I don't know, just where folks are coming from, because like you said, there's not a lot of information out there, but it's kind of surprising still to me that people in your shoes that are qualified, that have the experience, have the credentials, that have the drive, still can't find opportunities and kind of get like pushed into this almost, well, I guess I just have to do it myself. And so, it seems to have worked out well, and that's awesome. It's still amazing to me that the lack of opportunities sometimes that exists. So, but I do want to circle back to, you mentioned the financial literacy program. So talk to me just a little bit about, kind of give me the overview there and how you got into kind of that world and what that looks like for your firm now.
I guess it was in 2005. I was aware of a local nonprofit that had a domestic violence shelter. And it was for women and kids who needed a safe place to stay while they were going to court, while they were going through all the things that they have to go through to get away from an abusive situation. And I'd been aware of that program for a long time. And I kept thinking, if you know much about domestic violence, it's a lot about control. It's control of everything. It's control of access to money. It could be access to friends. It could be access to food. Could be access to kids. So it's much more oftentimes than quote unquote just the physical side of things. And so I kept thinking that these women would probably be well served if they could, walk through a situation where I could help show them what it would take to be financially back on their feet again. So I went to the volunteer coordinator of the organization and talked with them, and they said, "This is a great idea. We've never had anybody offer to do this. This is great. Come on in." It was a very humbling experience because I realized very quickly that a lot of the women that were there, they had already cashed in all their chips. They had pulled in favors from friends, from family. They had run up their credit cards. They were literally at the end of their rope before they came to the shelter. So they didn't need me telling them what they should have done. And we actually wound up making a referral to a consumer credit counseling service in town to help them get out of the situation where they were, because a lot of them were maybe one step away from bankruptcy, or if they weren't already in bankruptcy. So I went back to the volunteer coordinator and I said, I had good intentions, but this isn't working the way I thought it would. And she said, we've got this life skills class for foster kids, and we run 6 foster homes in the area at the time. And so I teamed up with a lady that was doing the life skills class, and it was things like teaching the kids how to read a rental agreement, or how to do laundry, or how to do dishes, or all these things that I think we take for granted sometimes. And they said, well, financial management should be part of what they're taught, because they're going to be probably financially independent sooner than most kids. So that's how it started. It was literally going around as a part of a life skills class. And then I had an opportunity to write a grant to get some funding, and they were like, well, we can't give you funding because you're not a nonprofit. And so I was like, well, then I'll become a nonprofit. And so in 2012, we developed a board. We did everything we needed to become a 501c3 nonprofit. We're still very, very small because, of course, Bridge Financial Planning is my full-time job and the way I earn a living. But, there are so many things, particularly in my community, but I don't think that they're just limited to my community. I just happen to know the statistics here because that's where I live. Every story you hear, whether it's about families who don't have $400 in case of an emergency, or that most households aren't prepared for retirement, or any number of things. I mean, all these things we hear over and over again, student loan debts out of control, all these things. It's like, how do you get in front of that problem where you educate someone enough to where they can avoid some of those big pitfalls early on? And that's where we try to focus. So we focus on ages 16 to 22, kind of that first summer job to first career, maybe, where they're going to maybe be taking on student loan debt or buying their first car or getting their first credit card. Those are the critical years where those habits are formed. And, I hear sometimes, well, why don't parents teach this? And I said, well, you're making the assumption that the parents always know what to do.
Right. They have to have that education in order to provide the education.
Right. I think back to my grandparents. Both of my grandfathers were blue-collar workers with pensions. They never made a lot. They never spent a lot. And when they retired, they had a pension. Well, that world's gone. And it went away with my parents' generation. So my parents' generation are kind of the younger end of the baby boomers. And they were, some of the first folks to have 401ks. Well, do you think they came in and said, well, here's how much you really need to save in your 401k to make up for the fact that you're not getting a pension anymore? That didn't happen.
If only. Probably would be a very different world today if they had.
And then at the same time, you have, all these things happening. So I think we need to be more deliberate. And one reason why I started my own financial education program instead of going along with another one is I got so discouraged looking at some of the programs that were out there that would have a Lamborghini up on the PowerPoint, or, skip a Starbucks and you'll be fine. Or,
right.
It's more than that. And getting, the ultimate goal in my mind is getting through to them that the idea of money isn't the ultimate goal. Money isn't the goal. Money's the tool. And if I can help those 16 to 22-year-olds capture that, then they're going to have more financially stable families. And this is kind of my latest soapbox, but I've been going around talking about this in my community about if you want economic development, you want financial education. People that have already spent their next paycheck don't start a company. If you want strong families, you want financial education. One of the top reasons for divorce is financial stress. If you want women to be empowered, you want financial education. We live longer. We tend to make less. We tend to be the caregivers and take time away from our careers for kids or parents. If you want these things in your community, then you've got to look at some of the things that are foundational to that. And financial literacy is part of it. It's not everything. I get that. One of my board members is a good old guy, and he says common sense is just part of the solution. There's no silver bullet. There's silver buckshot. So we're part of that silver buckshot.
Sure. And it's a huge missing component. I mean, I remember in my grad program, we did have kind of financial literacy research that was going on. And it was really disheartening that, I mean, everything that we were reviewing from a research standpoint and from a program standpoint was an utter failure. I mean, none of it was even moving the needle a little bit. And obviously we know we can move the needle. You know, when I was in school, we just weren't sure how. But I think it's an area that I think a lot of us got into financial planning because we wanted to help people. And, I recognize that, we know, and we talk about how monthly financial planning brings real financial planning to a whole new generation. Now, none of us are arrogant enough to believe that we can serve 100% of the population, because there are plenty of people out there that can't afford $100 to $200 a month for financial planning, if that's what folks are charging. It certainly opens up, I would say, traditional AUM model serves the top 5%. Monthly probably serves the next 45%, because, the other 50% of the population making below median household income probably can't afford a financial planner. And that's kind of where the financial literacy programs come in, because if we can't reach them with, more traditional style financial planning, which we're moving in that direction, but ultimately there will always be a cohort that needs this type of work. And I think there's a lot of planners that are very interested in it.
Right. Well, I'm glad to see, even just in the last few years, I've seen more attention be paid to this topic. And I'm thankful for all of it, because we're going to have to address the issue. It's just, do you want to be preventive or reactive about it?
So your program, you said, focuses on kind of recent high school grad, getting that first job, headed to college. Did you say that your nonprofit organization wrote its own curriculum in order to serve these young people?
Yes.
So is that something that, and I don't really know how the nonprofit world works, is that something that you share with others that are looking to launch their programs? Is it something you license out? So if I'm in Bozeman, Montana, and I want to start a financial literacy program, can I get access to your material so I don't have to recreate the wheel?
Yes. So we do a train the trainer model, where a few times a year we'll have organizations in town and out of town that might want to provide this program to schools, churches, organizations, whatever they want. And we walk them through kind of our philosophy on the financial education. It's not about who wants to be a millionaire. It's not about how fast can I get a Lamborghini. It's values-based, goals-based. And walking through each one of our lessons, right now we've got 6 lessons. And then as a licensed facilitator, someone gets a 1-year license to teach it. And for that, they share the pre and post test results back with us so we can continue to track our effectiveness. I will say that our program is nowhere near where I think it needs to be. We are still very small. I think our content is good. I think our delivery could be much better. We haven't had the funding, frankly, to do a lot of the things that I would like to see us do, whether it's, put some of this content online and make it video based, or, to be able to reach more people. There's a lot of things we can do better that we haven't got to yet, but it's a passion of mine, and it's not something I'm going to give up on. And if it's a bit of a baby organization for a while, that's okay. But I would love to see it gain more traction. I would love to see it help more people. So I'll give a real quick example. So I was doing the class one day, and there was this kid that was about 15, and he said, I want to be a landscaper. And I said, great. How much money do you think you're going to make as a landscaper? And he said, $600,000 a year. And
wow.
Yeah. And I said, okay. I said, how are you going to do that? And he said, well, mowing lawns and stuff. And I said, okay, so there's 2,000 hours in a year, 40 hours a week times 50 weeks a year. $300 an hour. Are you going to pay somebody $300 an hour to mow your lawn? Well, no. And I said, okay, well, how can you make $600,000? Maybe you've got several crews, and maybe you've got several contracts with business parks and malls and hospitals, and you've got, a wintertime business that makes up for the few months where you're not going to have grass growing around here. And you just saw his eyes get bigger and bigger. Like, everybody had always just told him he was crazy. And it's like, well, you can do this, but you're going to need to understand a balance sheet, an income statement, and you're going to need to know how to manage people, and you're going to need to understand all these things. So maybe you just go work for a landscaper next summer and see if it's really something you want to do. And by the way, when you get a car, you don't want a car, you want a truck. You're going to want to start hauling this stuff around. You're going to want to do this. So I think, the idea that the young person, the biggest financial asset they have is their future earnings power. And we don't tap into that. I know in the XY Planning Network, we talk a lot of times about part of our job with our clients is helping them budget and helping them cut expenses or helping them be more mindful of where their money's going. But then you guys are the first place I've ever heard talk about the other side of the equation, where it's like, how do we help them grow their income? How do we help them talk about how to grow the positive side too? And so taking that idea back to a young person that has this big dream, has this big idea, let's not shut them down. Let's not tell them they can't. Let's say, well, you can, but maybe it looks a little bit different than you thought. Maybe you have to go this other route.
I love that. And I think it's because, historically we have served people who already had money. We didn't have to help them on the income side. But I would argue that most financial planners are not prepared to have income-based conversations with their clients, whether that's salary negotiations or starting businesses or, anything like that. I think we have been trained and kind of bred to how do we slash budgets? How do we cut costs? Things like that, if we're working with someone that doesn't basically have what feels like unlimited resources, we know how to cut. We don't really know how to add. So it's interesting that you say that, because I think that's, especially when you're working with young people, that's all they have is how to add. And they have so much potential, and just a small tweak in habits when they're 17, 18, 19 years old will reap huge compounding benefits over their lifetime.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious, are you actually making any income off running this program, or is it purely on a pro bono basis?
I know that's all pro bono. I don't take any income out of Common Sense. We put it all back into the programming. I think it's a goal of ours to find someone who would want to be the program director, and we would love to have the long-term strategy to be able to hire somebody and do that. But no, it's never been a goal of mine to make that an income stream.
Yeah. And I figure there's some young people out there that are interested in financial planning, but are really passionate about the financial literacy, kind of lower income or younger age worlds that don't necessarily, again, they can't afford $200 a month for a financial planner. And so how do you break into this? So if we have somebody out there that's, passionate about financial literacy, how can they make a career out of it? Or is it truly just, it has to be on a pro bono basis? I mean, where are the opportunities for them?
Well, I think you can. And this goes back to probably my ignorance about the nonprofit world whenever I first got started, because I don't know if I was to start it again today, if it would have been a nonprofit again. Maybe it could have been a for-profit. I went that route for a variety of reasons, and I'm happy with it, and it's fine, and we're moving forward. But there's nothing to say that work has to be nonprofit. As one of my advisors for the organization told me, nonprofit doesn't mean non-revenue. You still have to have revenue. You still have to pay the bills at the end of the day. It just means that the money in the organization stays mission driven, and you don't pay out dividends like you do in a for-profit.
So you said you might not have gone the nonprofit route. Is that just because it's been so challenging to raise funding that there were other opportunities there, or is there a reason or is it just compliance with nonprofit rules is just a nightmare?
It's definitely probably a little bit more onerous to start a nonprofit than in terms of, you have to file with the IRS, you have to have a board of directors, you have to do a lot more record keeping, I think, in a different way. But it's not all bad at all. I'm actually very glad they have that in place because you don't want to have people using nonprofits for the wrong purposes. But I guess what I would say in terms of for-profit or not-for-profit, it's just what is your ultimate goal with the organization? Because you can accomplish a lot of things on either side of the fence, but it's been a learning experience for me. When I say it might not have been a nonprofit, it might have been a for-profit, there's nothing to say that work couldn't be done on a for-profit platform. But once you're in the nonprofit world and you're asking people for grants or donations or you're asking for funding, and this is going to sound really blunt and horrible, but if it's like save a puppy or give to financial literacy, you're never going to be on the winning end of that stick with financial literacy.
That's really interesting. So raising funding is a challenge just because the topic isn't as sexy, I guess, as some of the other things that are out there.
I mean, you really have to be much more targeted in who you go to, like who gets this, who understands what we're really trying to accomplish here, and that it's not really all about financial literacy. It's that financial literacy is the underpinning of all these other support mechanisms that make families and communities stronger. Like, you have to find the person that sees beyond the financial education tag.
It's interesting that you say that. My grandparents do a lot of work with Habitat for Humanity. And I remember them telling me that one of the things is like, what we know is that giving a family a home is huge in terms of setting up stability for them. But if all you do is just give them a home, they will ultimately lose it. If you just hand a family that has no money a home, it's great to have a home, but ultimately they end up losing it, just statistically speaking. And so they have various resources and education programs they have to go through, financial counseling essentially, and go through financial literacy programs in order to kind of qualify for the home. And they're seeing much higher success rates long-term than they did prior. And so I guess it's kind of that same argument of like, building a home for a family is the sexy thing that you can put out there and say that you help do, but ultimately providing the financial literacy is actually the core. It's giving them the skill set to actually be able to maintain and manage the home so that they can be long-term successful.
Exactly.
And so is there a place that you recommend folks go for kind of education in this world? Because, you and I went through the CFP programs. We know the CFP has absolutely nothing to do with anyone that makes less than, $100,000 a year. It feels like, just in terms of the education that you're getting. So, is it the Train the Trainer program? Is it the AFC designation? Do you have a place where you recommend either financial planners or folks looking to get into this field go to kind of get the overall education that they need to actually provide financial literacy programs?
Well, that's a great question, and I'm probably not super prepared to answer it because I feel like I've done everything the hard way. Like, there probably are some really great programs that I could have streamlined this process for myself, and I didn't.
Fair enough.
I know that NAPFA has the Consumer Education Foundation. I know they do a lot of that work. A strange place where you can get a lot of really cool statistics around all kinds of things, but I've found a lot of really cool information from Federal Reserve Board site.
Oh, interesting.
They do a lot of regional analysis on a lot of different topics, and they wind up having a lot of really insightful information that I've gathered before, whether it's from spending habits to consumer spending, or I'm blanking on some of the other topics, but there's a treasure trove of information out there. There's also NEFI, the National Endowment for Financial Education. That's a good site that has a lot of resources that are available for anyone that's wanting to do this kind of thing. And there's different chapters, I guess. Like in the town that I'm in, we don't have a strong FPA chapter. We'd have to go out of town to the next big city that had it, or even, like we don't have a CFP program here in town. Anyone around here that has it did the self-study, you'd have to go to Atlanta or Nashville, for that kind of thing. So depending on where you are, your town may have more or less resources out there locally.
That makes sense. Yeah, and I know I'm not all that familiar with the AFCPE, but I know they have the AFC designation, the Accredited Financial Counselor. And my understanding is that that is a designation, designed to get you up to speed in terms of education on how to talk about credit scores, not how to talk about retirement planning, which whenever you're doing financial literacy, we don't need to get into like high level estate planning and what's a GRAT and a GRUT, right?
Yeah, exactly.
we need to talk about the 5 components of a credit score. And so I'm going to go to the AFCPE conference this year for the first time. They'll, I believe, be exhibiting at the XYPN 16 conference. So it'll be a good chance to learn a little more.
Look them up.
Because I remember NAPFA 5, 6, 7 years ago did a thing called the Money Bus, and they had this bus that they got, and it was all painted up, and they did these like stops in a bunch of various cities across the country, and people would come and they would, ask CFP, fiduciary advisors are asking them financial questions that they had. And I talked to a couple of the advisors that were on those tours and at those various stops, because they just enlisted local NAPFA members. And I remember the thing that they came away with was that they didn't know anything that the common American was dealing with from a financial standpoint.
Yeah.
And because I love asking groups of advisors, I'm like, do you know the number one component to a credit score? What's the number one factor? And no one knows.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just amazing to me. And I think that was actually in the CFP program, but they just couldn't answer student loan question, credit questions, debt consolidation questions, like how do you bankruptcy questions, how do I know if bankruptcy is right for me? And so it was really interesting that, and we need more resources, whether that's EFC or that's other programs that are out there that are getting started. Yours is an example of this, to just continue to train people that want to help, whether that's through a church or through a school, all the various ways that we can do this. So I guess my final question to this before we kind of wrap back around to a little bit more information about your firm is, I know that there are a lot of programs out there. Yours is one of them. I hear about various programs that are taking parents and children through, financial programs together and all this stuff. I mean, do you have any other resources for folks that if they're looking for kind of programs in their local area to maybe get involved with, or various things they can do without actually starting their own nonprofit? Are there places that you could send a financial planner to find programs, or is it just a bit of a challenge?
Well, first of all, I don't think you have to start a nonprofit to do this in your community. You can volunteer. You can go out and talk to a group of people about this anytime. If it's something you want to do, if you're a CFP, you've certainly got all the knowledge base there that you need to make sure that you're giving people good advice. Maybe you need to brush up on what is incorporated in a credit score, or maybe you want to brush up on some things that, like you said, maybe aren't day-to-day conversations with clients in our practice, but you're going to know the basics. You're going to know what to talk to people about. And we've all been there before. Like, none of us got here unscathed. We've all made some financial mistake along the way. So, just sharing your own experiences, I think, is fine. I think in terms of other organizations, I know Junior Achievement has added a financial education component to their curriculum now. And, I actually haven't seen their financial education curriculum, but I know that the rest of their curriculum is very good. Would expect nothing less of their financial education curriculum. That tends to be, and I'm not saying this just about Junior Achievement, but one of the other things is they tend to be like one-day events. Like, they wave a magic wand and ding, you're financially literate. And I would like to see more ongoing conversations with young people. I don't think it's not a 45-minute conversation in the gym to get the kids out of class. It's not, it has to be something more. And the other really big preconception that I battle against constantly is the idea that only low-income kids need this. Or
that's a good point.
Because, working in the private wealth management group, I remember working with this family that was very prominent, had lots of money, everything was great. And their kid went to this probably $250,000 college education that mom and dad paid for. And mom and dad call me up and say, hey, would you talk to our kid? They just graduated from college and they just got their first job, and can you talk to them about what it's going to mean to be financially independent? And I'm like, sure, that's right up my alley. Bring them in. And sitting down, and the only thing this kid had ever done is swipe an ATM card or swipe a debit card and punch in an ATM PIN number. They were sitting in my office with a check from their first, pay stub, didn't know how to fill out a deposit slip.
Now, I know there are people out there that are like rich kid problems, but ultimately they're the ones that will end up potentially squandering wealth that their family has built because they don't know the basics.
So you're exactly right. So yeah, rich kid problems, right? But here's the thing. So that their parents were very philanthropic. They're very giving in the community. They are very strong people. And I think they thought that they were doing their kid a favor, and they're not. Because I think that they would like for their values of giving back and community development to continue with their children. But if they're not talking about it, and the only thing their kid's ever doing is swiping a debit card, are they going to be able to use that inherited wealth one day for the best purpose? Or are they going to be one of those people that are completely intimidated by financial decisions and put their head in the sand and decide not to do anything?
Yeah, it's so interesting how little financial literacy out there is. I mean, it's amazing to me still that I had to take a Georgia Constitution I had to pass the Georgia Constitution requirement, in order to graduate from the University of Georgia, but I never had to take a financial class, but teach their own. So, it is an issue. And to your point, financial literacy can be done inside of a financial planning firm as well, just working with the kids of existing clients. And I haven't gotten to read the whole book yet, but Ron Lieber's The Opposite of Spoiled, I think, hits on a lot of this in terms of, how do we teach, if you do have wealth, how do you teach your kids good financial habits so that they can, set themselves up for success? So I know this, I love this because I think that there's so much here that there are planners out there that really want to be doing this type of work. So I'm curious about the day job, which is you started your own firm about 1.5 years ago. So when you got started, I mean, where are you kind of seeing clients come in from, and what type of work are you doing? Just kind of a quick synopsis on the actual financial planning firm that you own now.
So I am 11 months in right now from signing my first client.
Nice.
So next month, July 31st, is my 1-year anniversary of signing my first client. So far I've got about 24 clients.
Wow, in 11 months?
And those are households. So, some of those are husband and wife or family members. So I would say most of them so far have been business owners, because that's something that I've focused on. Something that always just irritated me, frankly, was, waiting for somebody to have this big pile of investable assets before you can work with them at a traditional firm. Well, business owners are a perfect example of why you might be missing the boat if you do that, because you could have a business owner that has a high net worth, but not necessarily high investable assets yet. But they need a lot of planning help. I would say in a lot of cases, business owners need more planning help than the typical person, because they've got this whole other set of issues that go along with succession planning or tax or estate planning. All these other things have added components to them for business planning. And if you're the only financial advisor talking to them about why they should also invest, why they should maybe think about a retirement plan for their company, why they should, be diversifying their assets and diversifying their risk, then when they do have that quote unquote liquidity risk or liquidity event, as we like to say in the banking world, when they do have that liquidity event, then they're going to come to you. They're going to be ready to take that next step. And so I would say something that I'm trying to do. I did a really good job of promoting the financial planning side of my business early on. And so I've got a lot of financial planning clients.
Yeah. So talk to me about that. It's just in terms of, you said you promoted really well. I mean, where are these clients coming from? Because that's an amazing number of new clients in your first year.
Well, it all comes full circle. And I think this might be why Scott wanted me to come on, because this is what I think caught his attention. But all of this comes full circle. So there's a Chattanooga Women's Leadership Institute that's all about promoting women to be, leaders in the community. And one of the things that they started doing several years ago is having a financial empowerment series where here's a safe place where we get, estate planning attorneys, CFPs, we get all these people in a room, and it's a 6-week series, and we bring women in from the community, and we say, okay, all those questions that maybe you don't want to ask in front of your spouse or in front of your advisor or in front of your banker, like, bring it on. This is a safe place for you to ask all those questions, and there's nothing stupid about it. And here's what we're going to be covering. And these are important things for you to know. Well, 2 or 3 of my clients have been women who went to that in 2 or 3 years ago and heard me talk, and then they were like, oh, you started your own company? Well, I need to come in. Or even from Common Sense, like, people will hear about Common Sense, and then they're like, oh, but you do financial planning. So you're doing this all the time. Like, this is your world. And I'm like, yes, this is my world. And like, we need to come in. Or all of this starts tying in. So it could be community involvement that leads to these things. Like, there's a mayor's council for women that I've just recently become a part of. And they've been talking about economic opportunity issues for women in the city. And something that keeps coming back up is financial independence. Financial independence is a barrier to economic opportunity. And so I'm going to be heading a work group to talk about that. And one of the other women in one of the committees was like, me and my husband keep putting this off. We need to come see you. So all of these things start tying back in. It's not that it's one source or one place. Or I did an article in a local magazine last month and, got a call from somebody who read the article. So it's not that it's one place. It's just that it's a consistent message.
I think that's the important thing about, especially when you're starting a firm, is, I think people that have their silver bullet, marketing strategy, it doesn't always work. And so having that more shotgun approach to trying a lot of different various things can work. But, it sounds like you're having a lot of success in your local community. And again, you didn't get into doing the nonprofit work or the education work to get clients, but, they always say, by giving back, you get 10 times back what you put in, but usually only if you give back with good intentions.
But all of this, like I said, like, it's not, it's a consistent message. Like, I'm not saying anything in Common Sense that I wouldn't also say to a client sitting in front of me. Now, maybe the level of sophistication is different, or maybe the dollar amounts are different, but the principles are the same. And so I think when people see that consistency, whether it's, like I was having this conversation with somebody the other day, that there are about 4 million things that I care about, like whether it's, social issues or the environment or, name your thing. Like, there's about 1 million things that we all could care about. But at some point I realized I was trying to have too much voice on too many things. And the message was getting drowned out because I wasn't focusing on what I could really impact. And so I really just decided, okay, where do I have an authentic voice, and where will my voice matter? And I think that came back to financial education and women in leadership. Where those two things cross section, that's where I am. And so that's, it's been deliberate because I got frustrated when I was trying to care too much about too many things,
Right. No, it makes perfect sense. And again, it's amazing that whenever you get involved in things you're really passionate about, it's a good opportunity to meet people. So, again, you don't do it just for clients. That's certainly not going to be effective. But again, with kind of consistent messaging and staying true to your core and your passion, which for you is education, truly. And I think a lot of financial planners try to separate financial planning and financial education, which I think is a mistake. I think that it all is wrapped in together, maybe different levels and different complexities, but ultimately it's all education is what we do. And so, again, it has been a big driver for you for new clients in your local area, which is huge.
Yeah. So other things about business in my first year, I would say nothing has gone as planned, but that's not all bad. But, you make a good plan, you work it, but you need to be really flexible and be ready to adjust when you need to. I think something for me, I think the asset management side is starting to come on board. I don't know, everybody has a different take on fee schedules or on, financial planning only or investment only or both. And, I'm hoping to create a firm that welcomes both. I feel like to reach the kind of revenue goals that I want, I'm going to have a good mix of both. I don't think it's going to come, like if all I did was investment planning, I don't feel like I would be fulfilling my goal for the business. But if I did strictly, retainer-based financial planning, I don't know that I would see the revenue that I want. Like there's this fine balance because this whole industry is still in this time of flux, and there's not like this perfect model and this perfect fee schedule and this. So I think we're all still figuring it out, and that's okay. At the end of the day, I want to be able to ask myself, am I being fair to my clients, and am I getting compensated fairly for what I'm giving? And if I can answer both of those questions yes, then the rest are just details.
Fair enough. And I do think that, with the way kind of XYPN is pushing it and other organizations are pushing different fee models and that sort of thing, I think we're going to have a little bit of a break from standardized fee structures, which we have had for the last couple of decades, because everyone just kind of charged the same. But ultimately, my push has always been, tell me your ideal client, and then we'll design the perfect fee structure for them. And it's going to look different from every other financial planning firm out there. And so whether it's your ideal client or just the ideal way you do business or the ideal way that you communicate your value, there's a lot of different ways to do it. But ultimately, there is no single perfect way to do this thing.
That's right.
And to charge for it. So, well, Jennifer, thank you so much for taking the time to be on. I know that, again, the topic of financial literacy is something I hear about all the time coming up from advisors, especially young planners looking to get into financial planning. And, can they do pro bono work while they work at a firm? Can they roll out a pro bono model to help a few people? I know some advisory firms that require one pro bono client per advisor per year. There's a lot of different ways. So, but this is the most intensive way that I have seen an advisor be involved in financial education and literacy. And thank you for that work, because ultimately I think that you'll make a huge impact in that work in ways that you will probably never realize, because you'll lose touch with a lot of the people that you're helping. So,
well, thank you.
But I do want to, I'll ask you the final question, which is, if you could go back to, Jennifer, even just a few years ago, as you were evaluating your career and the direction that you wanted to go, if there was one thing that you wish you could go back and tell yourself, kind of what you wish you had known then that you know now, what do you think that one thing would be?
I don't want this to come across in an arrogant way. I want it to come across as hopefully an encouragement to others that might hear this, but I was stronger than I thought I was. I had always been intimidated with the idea of starting my own company. And once you make that decision in your mind and and the switch flips and it's something it's not something you want to do, it's something you have to do, then you're going to dig in and you're going to find what you need to make it happen. And that's what I found. And it's been very eye-opening. It's been very humbling, but it's been very exciting, because now I feel like, there's a lot of other things that are possible that maybe I didn't consider before.
I love it. And I think there's some people out there that think like some of us were born with the innate ability to start businesses. Like none of us knew what we were doing when we started our first business. And,
no, I certainly didn't.
We're clicking around trying to figure out how to get an EIN number because someone mentioned we might need one. I mean, none of us had I've never read a book on how to start a business.
Right.
I read a lot about theory, but the actual nuts and bolts, you don't know until you get into it and try it and learn and fail and learn again. But, I love that. I think that's an awesome message, because I think there's so many people out there that ultimately are just on the fence and just not quite sure how to take the next step. So, well, Jennifer, thank you again for taking the time to be on. I really do appreciate it.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you. And thank you for what you're doing.
Thanks again to Scott for recommending Jennifer for the show. I am so thrilled we got to dig into her work in financial literacy, since I know it's a topic that a lot of financial planners have a passion for and are very interested in. And I am amazed that in addition to running that program, her financial planning firm is also growing like crazy. It is just absolutely amazing to see. So remember to join our VIP community to be able to ask XYPN members, previous guests, as well as Kitsis and myself questions, as well as interact with other members of the VIP community to get their perspectives at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Be sure to join soon to take advantage of XYPN's 16 conference discounts. Thanks again for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.